Hi there, friends. It's Ashley with My Homeschool Brain, where you get to pick the juicy tidbits from here and do what you want with them. So today's How to Homeschool lesson is covering choosing your curriculum. There are 4 main concepts or thoughts and actions that you need to do, and each one of those has some micro steps. So get yourself something to drink. I have my little go-go juice right here because I'm sure my throat's going to get dry at some point. And let's dive into this. First and foremost, the first thing you need to do is to know your state laws. Go to www.hslda.org, and there you'll find a plethora of free resources that are specific to your state. Why is that important to know? Because every state regulates homeschool differently. There are some states that I would call a green state, which is very lax in their homeschool rules and regulations and expectations. And then you have your yellow states, which adds a little bit of rules and regulations. And then your red states, which are what I would call very controlled homeschooling states. So depending on what state you live in, you may have to file an intent to homeschool with your school district. You may have to keep a portfolio. You may have to submit a list of curriculum that you're going to use that year. You may have to report to a homeschool advisor or an academic advisor every year. You may get told specific subjects that you have to teach. Or what is your state's expectations on standardized tests? Are you required to do them? If so, and when? Those are all big things that you need to know before you start homeschooling. And for a tip, I would print off a copy of your state laws and keep a copy in each child's portfolio every year. That way, it doesn't matter what year you grab or what child's book you grab, you can easily reflect on those state laws. And while they may not change that often, they could. And if you don't look into it every year, you don't know if something has changed. So I would just print a new one off every year for each portfolio for each kid. Little side step here. Live in a state that does not require a portfolio, keep one anyway. There are lots of reasons for that. It is basically protection for you, protection for your kid in a legal sense if you were to ever need it. I will make a whole other video just on a homeschool portfolio. But just know that I'm going to tell you, and a lot of homeschoolers, I won't say most, but a lot of other homeschool families will tell you to keep one. The next step is a very, very important step in your homeschool curriculum choice stage. You need to self-reflect before you purchase curriculum, before you even start looking at curriculum. You need to do some self-reflection, and that looks like this. What do you already have at your fingertips? What can be included from your home library that you can use for your school this year? And it's not necessarily a curriculum thing, but maybe it's just resource books, as the dictionaries and the fun encyclopedias, and you know, what resources do you have available to you right now? Just make a note of those things. Second is, are you going to teach from a faith-based curriculum or a secular or no faith-based? That will really separate some of these subjects into these 2 proverbial columns. And if you know for sure you want everything faith-based, then, that eliminates these secular ones, or vice versa. How many subjects are you going to teach as a family unit, as a group? For our family, the only things that we teach separately is math and spelling words. Everything else we teach as a group, as a family unit. And my kids are 15 months apart. I've known families that have kids several grades apart that still do this with a lot of subjects, or at least some of their subjects. So which subjects do you want to or can you teach as a group? The next very important piece is setting goals for your kids. In fundamental breakdown is, what academic markers do you want them to meet? Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? And what are you going to build on either one of those this year? And those goals will change every year. Once they master something that they are struggling with, you can change the goal next year. If they are really gifted in an area, or really know for sure this is what I want to do when I grow up, then keep building that every year to work on their strengths. Another piece is, what is your child's learning style? As a first-year homeschool parent, you may not think that you know, or you just may not know how your child learns best. Is your child a hands-on, gotta touch it and hold it, a kinesthetic child? Is your child a read and write? I just have to read it and move on. Visual child? Is your child a auditory learner, meaning that they want to hear and discuss and communicate these subjects or topics or whatever? How does your child learn best? There are lots of resources available to you online of how to kind of identify your child's learning style. I'll try to link some of those down below. What is your teaching style? Do you know? Let me give you an example. Are you a teacher who is very hands-on, loves the projects, the manipulatives, getting dirty with your kids and baking and making a mess everywhere? Or are you a homeschool mom who would rather just sit at the table and follow a traditional clock? At this time we do this, at this time we do this, at this time we do this? Or are you what I am, which is kind of like a check and go system, where we come in, we have our normal routine that we do, sit down to homeschool in a homeschool area, which is, in this house is a homeschool room, but sometimes it's my kitchen table, depending on what house we're in. And we just hit this subject, bam, 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 until school is done. And, our day is freed up to do other things, or to dive in deeper to another subject or a specific topic. Do you want a curriculum where you really don't have to teach? That maybe you are a DVD learning system where you buy a DVD, hit play, the student learns through an outside resource, like teaching textbooks and some of your grammar. Curriculums have a DVD resource, or online. And so there are homeschool classes you can take that are 100% online. So what is your teaching style? Because if you pick a curriculum that is complete opposite of your teaching style, you're going to hate and loathe that curriculum. If you are hands-off and you're gearing your children or training your children to be self-taught, I'm not 100% hands-off at this point, but that's eventually where we get to, is self-taught learners. Then a very heavy scripted teacher, parent-led curriculum by the time I have a sixth grader is not something I want to do. By the time they're in sixth grade, my children are pretty much teaching themselves. With mom, of course, right there available for help anytime and to do the grading and that sort of thing. But I want my kids to be self-taught. So as they get older, there will be less parent-led. A tricky part of this reflection and choosing your curriculum is finding that balance of seeing curriculum through your children's eyes and not necessarily through your own. You may see this curriculum and go, oh my gosh, this is amazing and it's wonderful and it's, all these glorious things. But you have however many years of knowledge stored back there. And so you can look from a looking forward and looking back perspective, a 360 view of a subject, and go, oh my gosh, that's super interesting. But your children maybe don't have that prior history and that prior perspective of any given topic. And so for them, it might be overwhelming because you needed to start with those fundamental pieces first. And so choosing curriculum through your child's eyes, and not only your eyes, is tricky because you know that there's things they need to learn, and then there's things that that you want them to want to learn, or that they just want to learn. And so that's kind of one of those things that you just kind of have to pick and choose. But do your best to choose curriculum from where your child sits and not necessarily where mom sits, if at all possible. And that it's not a blanket statement across all subjects, because math is never going to be one of those. You can meet them at their starting level, but then you're going to have to build, and it's very sequential, and it works that way. I have some mommy tips for you, homeschool tips here. Start simple and build up. I am into year 5 of homeschooling, and I have a lot of stuff for homeschool. I did not always have a lot of stuff. I started off with very basic necessities, which I cover in my Homeschool Essentials, which is lesson 1 of my How to Homeschool series. And I just build every little bit from year to year, and eventually you have a well-stocked homeschool. Do not go out and buy hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of homeschool stuff. You don't need it all right now. What you need is a simple system that eases you in, that you can just add to. Now, you don't have to just add year by year. You can add throughout the year. So the beginning of your school year as your first year homeschooler may just be math, language arts, a science, and a history. And that's it. And then as you get more comfortable with this process, you might add in an art, or you might just add in that extracurricular activity, bowling or sports or theater or whatever. And then you add in maybe an additional science project source. So you just build on these things. Start simple. Start with what you have and start simple. Create a budget for homeschool. Not just for this year, but for every year. And as a first year homeschooler, you're not really going to know like what you must have to build that budget on, but you already know what's in your bank. So work with what's in your bank account. If you only have $200 to spend, figure out a way to spend that $200 wisely. If you know that you've got $600 to spend, then again, don't have to spend all of that $600. Spend it wisely. And as you start to explore curriculum, you're going to come across things that you're very intrigued by. In which case, I'm going to tell you to keep a wish list. I keep one in my handy dandy notebook, and I have it broke down by subject, so that way when I find this great math curriculum, I just write it under math, and so I can look at that next year. And I keep kind of a running total. So like if I know it's Saxon math that I like, depending on the grade level, it's $150 to $190 or something. And so I'll just write that kind of the side so I can budget for next year. I need $200 for math, whatever that is. And the same thing with your language. If you really find one that you love, you can't afford it this year because it's not in your budget, but make a note under your language arts or your grammar section, this program, and right now what it roughly costs. That way, when you go to build a budget for next year, you can say, okay, I know I need $200 for math for each kid. I'm going to spend $80 in language arts. Which gives me a grand total of $600 that I need for the whole school year for next year. And so you know what to budget for and save up monthly for if you need to, in order to get that perfect dream curriculum for the following year. I hope I am not really confusing everybody. My other little tip here is kind of a tricky one. I am going to tell you to do not 100% trust the experts on anything. Expert advice runs on the concept of the law of large numbers, meaning they take all the children in this said group and figure out what the average child learns, or the average child understands, or the average child whatever. I don't know many average children. I don't know that I've ever met an average child. And I say that because each child is an individual. They're unique, and they may all fit into this age bracket together. They may be a whole room full of 8-year-olds, but each 8-year-old is different. They learn different, they process different, and they are able to articulate differently. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. So I don't like the law of large numbers concept when it comes to children and their education. That is one of my problems with the public school system as a whole, is they put these children in batches based on age instead of what they are good at. If you took all of the children who are amazing at math and put them in a room, and all the children that are amazing in science and put them into a room, their education would be built catered to them, and I love that. So when I say question the experts, just because they say your kid should be learning here, you'd be reading at this level by grade 3. Not necessarily. Maybe your child is above average and is reading at grade 8 at grade 3. Maybe your child has a learning curve like mine, or maybe they're just not interested in reading yet, like really interested in it. And so they don't care enough to really pay attention to read really well. And so that child may not really start learning to read until they're 10 or 11 or 12 years old, which sounds completely crazy. But if that is the way your child is working, then work with it. Build on it, encourage them, and love them through it until they get to a point that they are happy and you're happy. But just because the experts say they should be reading here at this level, that's not necessarily true, because them reading at grade level, at grade 3, has no bearance on who they're going to become as an adult. 0. That is what they got on their test in 3rd grade math, or the fact that they couldn't read till they were 12, or the fact that, they're just not good at memorizing facts, has no bearance at all on what they're going to do in their careers, what kind of person they're going to become as they grow up, how many kids they're going to have, if they're going to go to college or not. Those things don't matter right now. What matters is instilling a love for your child and meeting your child where they're at, and not expecting them to meet the standard of what the experts say is necessary. Not that having goals for your kids is not important, because we've already discussed those goals, but you don't have to keep them in a box. Let your children be unique and beautiful and wonderful and magical just the way they are, and meet them where they're at and guide them and push them to learn new and to grow up to being confident little people. Okay, so let me just recap real quick. You need to know your state laws, do some self-reflection, and I gave you some tips. And the next piece of this puzzle is your research. And here is where those micro steps really come in handy. The next critical step, which has the most little micro steps in it, is doing your research. Your research is going to give you a funnel system, kind of. And we're going to go over those little micro steps. So first and foremost, we kind of already discussed budgeting. And as a new homeschool family, ideally, you want to start off with everything that you could possibly need. The problem with that is that there's no possible way to do that unless you have loads of money, and money is not an obstacle. But for the rest of us, money is a big part of what curriculum we buy, how much we invest, what our school looks like, our homeschool looks like, where our classroom's at. And you can't ever be okay with saying, oh man, that homeschool mom really has, what I want and I need it today. No, that homeschool mom has probably been building that or budgeting for that for years to have that. So it may look beautiful, but that doesn't mean she went out on her day one of homeschool and bought everything to make it great. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Just do what you can when you can. And that is so important. You don't want to go broke trying to teach your kids. So decide today, before you start your research, what money you have available for homeschool supplies, and get it kind of a pretty close number. I don't mean an exact number, but if you've got $300 to spend, then that's going to help narrow some of those other big box all-in-ones out, because they're much more than $300. If that's all you have, let's figure out a way to build your curriculum based on that $300. Now, it might end up being $320, it might end up being $280, but it's roughly that goal of hitting. Don't blow your entire budget on one school curriculum. So if you have $300 to spend, then don't buy a $300 curriculum for language arts. I know it sounds like logical stuff to be saying, but in the moment, as you're researching, you kind of fall in love with a particular textbook or program, and it's going to draw you. You're going to think, oh my gosh, that's the one I have to have this year. I can't wait. I got to have it right now. But the problem with that is that blows the rest of your budget. So don't let that push you to make a big mistake. The exception to that rule is if you have been homeschooling a really long time and you can pull 12 different resources off your shelf from 12 different curriculums that you have, and your entire budget is going to be geared towards one subject because you have the rest of them on your shelf already, great. But you're going to have to build up to that. This first year, really start small and build. When you're looking at this curriculum, the next question you need to ask yourself is, can I reuse this for the next kid? Does this curriculum have a lot of worksheets that are consumables that you can copy for next year? Or does this curriculum have such a strategic and intricate color cut and paste out system that will require you to purchase a new workbook every year for that kid? Either way is fine, but if you can buy this curriculum this year, say for grade 5, and then you've got a third grader in 2 years that could reuse the textbook part and all you have to buy is the workbook, or maybe here in grade 5, you didn't use that consumable workbook. You made copies of it or worked it in a notebook beside it. So when your third grader comes up to that, that's already purchased for you. Great, do that too. But the question is can I reuse it? And do I need to reuse it? Is my budget really, really narrow and I don't see that budget expanding a whole lot over the next several years? Then gear your curriculum choices based on things that you can use for multiple kids. Hope that made sense. There is a video that I've done that discusses the homeschool methods and how all of them are different and finding your learning styles and all that good stuff. But let's just say you're like me and you kind of like them all. And you can literally take one piece of this style and 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 pull it all together, which is what they call an eclectic homeschooler. I do that every year. I love all different methods of learning, and I want to incorporate all different methods of learning into our homeschool. So piecing it together can be really beneficial. Here's where things get a little shady, and I guess I'm going to use the word shady when it comes to paper piecing your homeschool curriculum, is that you now have to go in with each individual subject of learning and decide how you're going to teach that. And is, this curriculum is a 28 weeks and you need 36. So what do you do for those fillers? But this one is actually, man, I could really break that down to 2 years. How are you going to piece those all together? And as a first year homeschool, that comes across as intimidating. So maybe the route you need to go, if you have the budget for it, is a all-in-one, all-inclusive box curriculum like Oak Meadow or Becca or Sunlight, where you can literally buy all of 5th grade at one time. Everything you're going to need for 5th grade, everything you're going to need for 2nd grade. Those are very expensive programs. But if that is what you need because it has everything in there, then great, go for it. If it's in your budget, try it, rock it. But if you look at one of those big boxes and you're like, man, I really like the science in this one, buy the science, don't buy the whole kit. It's just piecing it together. The next little micro step is, okay, I really like Saxon math. You don't have to buy it brand new. You can get on eBay, maybe buy it used. You can get out to thrift books or a Facebook homeschool curriculum page and maybe just put a feeler out. Hey guys, I'm looking for Saxon 3. Maybe tell them, here's my budget. Does anybody have anything that can work with this? And see if you can buy it used. So I have a girlfriend who really wants to do Saxon 3, and she's going to order the workbooks. And because I don't use the teacher's manual for that grade, I'm mailing her my book. It's great. She doesn't have to put in that big expense, and I get something off my shelf that I'm not using. The next little micro step in doing your research is to read the reviews. Get out on that particular company's website. There's going to be a bunch of reviews. Try to find ones that are not favorable to the curriculum and see what those families didn't like about it. And maybe it's just something small that got blown up really big, or maybe it's a fundamental learning problem that this child has, and you see that it didn't work for them because of their learning curve, and your child also has it, and so it makes you go, well, let me look a little deeper. A lot of times too, said curriculum can be also bought on Amazon. Go over to Amazon, see if you can find it there. If nothing else, just to read the reviews. People come at things from all different points of view, and you're going to have to weed through what is a fundamental, legit reason to love or like, and those ones that are obviously, or what you'd think would be obviously paid, or this was a minor problem that turned into a big one. I'm not really concerned about that. So do the reviews. There are lots of homeschool blogs that offer curriculum reviews. There is lots of YouTube videos that offer curriculum reviews. And KathyDuffy.com great list of homeschool curriculum, and she breaks down the pros and cons of what she thinks are in all those and the takeaways from each one of them, and see what she has to say. The final micro step to research is to understand the layout of the curriculum. Do you need a system that is very turn the page and go? For us, that is math. Math is one. I need to just physically turn the page and do the next lesson. I don't want to have to do a lot of bringing things in and grouping things for that lesson. I just want to be able to open it up on the go or in the car or while we're traveling, or send it to my mom and be like, hey, this is what she needs to do. And it's very open and go. Or do you want all those hands-on projects? Do you want to be a very heavy teacher-led or parent-led educator? Do you want all of your subjects to where you are touching with your kids on every single thing? Or are you going to need to have something that you can just hand them and say, here you go, have some independent time. I'll catch you in a little bit and we'll review it. Thank you, baby. Does it fit your family's needs and lifestyle? If you are the family that has lots of errands to run all the time, you're involved with lots of extracurriculars, a very hands-on, detailed, bring in all these resources, manipulative type program may not work in the car, or it may not work in that, small window that you have in between things. So knowing your lifestyle and how it looks and it feels is a big deal. A lot of companies with a curriculum will offer online a sequence of events. That's not the word I was looking for. A lot of companies will have online listed their scope and sequence of what the layout is and how it's taught, kind of in a review or something. And so get on there and look. How many days a week is this curriculum expected to be taught? If it's a curriculum that you only planned on doing once a week, but they have it 3 times a week, can you use it? Sure, absolutely. Do you feel like, but if you feel like you have to follow that scope and sequence and it does say 3 times a week and you really only want once a week, then maybe a unit study is better for you instead on that particular subject. So knowing your family's lifestyle and the look and feel of how the curriculum will be executed is the last piece of that puzzle. You're going to want to figure out how much time it takes to teach an average lesson. If you are the family that follows a clock and you do every 40 minutes, you do a different subject, but this subject you just bought is very hands-on, so it's going to take you an hour and a half to do. That's a big difference in your day. And so maybe that's not the one that you want to purchase because it's just too involved. Or maybe you go ahead and purchase that curriculum, but it is not as its intended purpose as a primary resource. It's a supplemental. It's your project-based learning, or it's the once a month thing that you do. And that's fine too. But understanding how all those little pieces all work of your lifestyle and the curriculum itself, they have to mesh or this is never going to work. It's going to be miserable. And nobody wants to learn miserably or teach miserably. So in a nutshell, those are your final little layout pieces, are your final micro pieces to doing your research. So now that you have taken the time to know your laws, to self-reflect, hearing those tips that I gave you, doing your research and all the little steps that go in between, you should be able to now go out and Google homeschool curriculum. And based on these guidelines, you'll be able to narrow your focus down or funnel down to 1 or maybe 2 curriculum choices for any given subject. And when you get down and there's one solid and it's in your budget, it's exactly what you need, great. Add that to the must-buy list. If you get down there and there's 2 that you can go either way on, you're going to just have to make a choice at that point. And know that sometimes you're going to choose wrong. At some point in your homeschool journey, you're going to have that, I can't believe I just did that, moment. Or it's totally not what I thought that was going to be. I just blew my budget buying, on this particular subject that I should have bought the other one. It's going to happen at some point. Unless you can physically borrow somebody else's to try, you're not going to really know until you get into that particular curriculum how much you're going to love or hate it. And it's going to happen at some point. So just be prepared for that. I'm year 5 homeschooler and it happened to me this year. So it's just what it is. So at this point, you have your top 2, 3, 4, or 5 subjects that you want to buy. you're done. Make the decision. You've done your research. You've looked and done your self-reflection. Don't second guess your initial thoughts. And everybody either does have or will have the other homeschool mom who gives her opinions, and you eagerly take them and you want to listen to that maybe more experienced mom, but that doesn't mean that her system will work or that her opinion actually is correct in your home. So I try really hard to kind of help guide some of my newer homeschool family friends, but I really don't ever want them to say, but you're doing it and I want to do it. I'm like, no, don't do it because I'm doing it. Don't do it just if that's your cause, if that's your why. That's not a good enough reason to spend that kind of money on a curriculum. Go with your own instincts. You'll figure it out, I promise. So in a nutshell, that is the multitude of micro steps that you're going to need to take. And you're going to those are going to come easier and easier and easier every year, especially with you keeping that running wish list. It's going to get easier. This first year may seem very overwhelming, but I promise it does get easier most years. Thank you for your time today. I hope I didn't completely stress you out and overwhelm you. And like always, welcome to my crazy, and I'll see you next time.